Yes, I'm aware he's the #1 yoga instructor on the West Coast. I'm just saying I want to do more research. No, I didn't say I was backing out. I was just having second thoughts. I mean, well, being skeptical is my nature. Yes, I did get the mat. Yes. You know what? Maybe I'm not that stressed after all. Yes, I do appreciate that. You got me a spot with the best hot yoga instructor in town. Okay. Well, if I'm going to be there, I'm going to have to leave right now. Okay, see you. Hey, AI, give me a bullet point list of the pros and cons of yoga.
Hey, Dr. Plummer, sure thing. According to some of the latest research, yoga has been shown to reduce stress levels, improve flexibility. There's also some evidence that it helps with anxiety.
This is good. Okay, I'm definitely going. Awesome.
But we definitely don't want to leave out the other side of the coin because, to put it mildly, they are kind of surprising, or maybe I should say surprisingly scary. Some of the research gets kind of dark, so I hope you're sitting down for this.
Yoga. Is it helpful, or is that just a stretch? I'm Dr. Nadine Plummer, ND, and that's the question we'll be looking into today. The soaring popularity of yoga has taken the West by storm, and the trend does not appear to be slowing down. Researchers estimate that more than 300 million people practice yoga worldwide as of 2025. That's an increase from an estimated 200 million people practicing in 2012. So, no one can deny that the movement has clearly gone viral. But many have begun to scrutinize this practice of yoga, wondering, is this just an exercise, or is it a religious practice? What is the history behind the movement, and what is it that keeps drawing the masses?
Well, I do yoga, and I'm a psychiatrist, so I understand that in Canadian guidelines, it's also a level 2 evidence for anxiety and for depression treatment. So I think adding on yoga to whatever you do is likely to increase your quality of life, if anything. With regards to psychosis, I personally have not seen any patient of mine getting psychosis from yoga.
Well, as a yoga teacher, what do you think? It is my best friend. It's my first husband, not a second husband. But the question is, what type of yoga you're referring to? Because yoga has got quite a few pillars, whether we're talking yoga meditation, whether we're talking yoga, what we call pranayama practices or breathing, which is taking now quite a by the storm, or whether we're talking a physical practice, or, as I mentioned before, self-exploration or self-study. So psychosis, I believe also certain types of the breathing exercises, they are introduced too quickly to people that they don't know about themselves. And again, if they are dealing with high level of anxiety or panics, it can induce a bit of psychosis. I believe so too, if you're forcing yourself without having much knowledge or without having proper instruction for very well-known or very well-experienced teacher, absolutely. But once again, physical practice, I don't think so. We can get psychotic on an asana practice. Meditation can stir up, because if you allow yourself to go deeper and some things comes on the surface, maybe the things comes up that you don't know how to answer or you don't know how to handle it. That's why yoga should be practiced under very skilled practitioners, teachers, that they know how to hold the space for the practitioners if those things occur in the practice. So beautiful things to do it on one-on-one. And I had clients that were coming to see me with lots of anxiety and panic attacks, and absolutely simple touch and deeper breathing can bring lots of crying and lots of almost hysteria. And sometimes we're very scared and we need to close it down really quickly, or create a safe space for those people to process that on their own and just simply hold the space, very safe space to go through that process. But once again, it's not that easy to answer whether yoga as an umbrella. Absolutely not. Is yoga a friend? As I said, absolutely yes.
Opinions are great, but we thought it might be better to sit down with the experts. We sat down with a local yoga instructor at their studio to help us understand what is it that keeps people coming.
Eileen, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for being here to interview me.
Eileen, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you into yoga in the first place?
I am a certified Iyengar teacher, which is a very specific method. I was in a car accident when I was hit by a car in about 1989, 1990 in Toronto. And I met my first teacher, who is still my teacher, Marlene Momini. And she ran medical classes, the therapy classes, which kind of looks like what's around you. And I started my journey there. And from being in her medical classes, I started to volunteer my time once I got well. And I entered the teacher training program, which is about 3 to 5 years. And then I went for certification after that.
So you mentioned Iyengar yoga. I want to ask, what type of yoga do you practice? What type of yoga do you teach? Tell us a little bit about Iyengar yoga.
So B.K.S. Iyengar is probably one of the most influential yogis of our time. He, all the props that you see around us and all the props that you see in classes today are from him. And he brought about the highest level of certification because he believed teachers needed to be educated. To be an Iyengar teacher is a 3 to 5 year process, and he made different levels. So I'm a level 3, which is a very high level, and you usually don't become a level 3 teacher till you're probably 50 or 60 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so you have to go through the ranks.
What do you enjoy the most about yoga itself?
The scientific aspect of it.
Okay. Can you tell us about the benefits of yoga?
Yoga has so many benefits. Mobility, stability, strength, mental stability, I think is one of the first and foremost. It builds community and it keeps you young.
So Eileen, this might seem like a general question, but what is yoga?
Yoga is, I guess, the journey of going inward, the journey of the body and the mind connecting. Our bodies are chemicals and react to our environment, and yoga teaches us to treat our bodies differently. It's a mind-body connection.
There's so many different types of yoga. There's Hatha yoga, Ashtanga yoga. You said the type of yoga that you're practicing, Kundalini yoga. And many of them include breath work. They might include chanting. Some of them are esoteric or spiritual aspects of yoga. What do you teach?
First, we start with the physical posture and then the breath work. So you have to open up the body first and strengthen the spine and strengthen the nervous system before you can start bringing in the breath work. But you teach breath work more like conditioned breathing in class, and every posture, the shape of the posture affects the breath. And I think that's one of the biggest things the yogis understood. By positioning the body, it's going to change the person's breath. And as far as the esoteric part, Iyengar, in his wisdom, said, leave that out of the classroom. Teach the body, and that will change the mind. And so I think that's a really important aspect. It doesn't mean that it's not part of it. If people want to talk about it, I'm certainly there and open to do it, but I don't bring it into my classes. So I don't really talk about energy. But the energy is there as you're working through the postures. You can't help but deny that something transforms in a class.
Those were fascinating insights from an expert, but that isn't the only perspective. We now turn to a former yoga instructor who has stopped practicing yoga entirely. Why? She says that when she uncovered the little-known religious roots of yoga, she was brought to a complete turning point. Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
Hi there, I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being on the show. Sarah, I had a couple of questions. I just wanted to start with, could you give our viewers just a brief history of how you started getting into yoga? Like, what was the spark and the interest in yoga for you?
Sure, yeah. So in the beginning, when I first started my own personal yoga journey, I was looking for something to de-stress, something to find peace, and also to get my body moving. I hadn't really been into exercise all that much. And I had also recently experienced a loss of an immediate family member, and that was really taking a toll on my mental health, my physical health, and I was just looking for that peace and relaxation that I discovered when I first went to a yoga class. Um, I was also growing my personal relationship with Jesus at that time, but I was in my very infancy stages of getting to know who Jesus was for myself.
And then how far in advance or how advanced did you get into the practice of yoga?
Yeah, so after I initially started practicing, it was probably a year or so, and I was really pleased with the progress that I had made physically in my body with becoming more flexible. I was also really enjoying, going to class and just kind of zoning out for that hour of the day. And I really felt that I was gaining some peace and relaxation from this practice. And so I wanted to share that with other people. And so I decided to pursue teacher training. And in my process of pursuing teacher training, I was also growing my relationship with God, and I believe that God divinely put me in connection with a Christian yoga teacher training that I did take and became certified to teach yoga from a somewhat biblical standpoint.
Interesting. What can you tell us about, you mentioned that I guess you were doing Christian yoga. What can you tell us that you learned about the religious aspect of yoga itself?
So during my teacher training, I didn't learn a whole lot about the religious aspect of yoga. We were studying the Bible. We were looking at scripture and linking texts about the breath of God and serving God with our whole mind, body, strength, spirit. So we were kind of, in essence, substituting the religious aspect of yoga in my teacher training. However, after I finished teacher training, and actually after I had been teaching for several years, I furthered my own education in the practice of yoga, and I discovered many things that I was not previously taught. Similar to other Eastern practices, oftentimes in the lower levels of the practice, the philosophy and teachings, the spiritual teachings aren't really made plain. And so I remember going to yoga classes where they would do chanting, where I didn't know what they were saying because it was in a different language. And I just kind of thought, well, it's just all good and fine because I didn't know. I was coming from a place of ignorance. But then later on, when I decided to pursue my own furthering in education, I discovered some things that kind of clashed with my understanding of the Bible and what God's plan for us is.
How much of that history, first, what was it that you discovered, I guess, going back to the origin of yoga? And then how much of that history do you feel is still part of today's modern yoga?
That's a great question. So the word yoga means to yoke or to unite. And so in the practice of yoga, this is specifically talking about the yoking or uniting of the breath with movement. And in the spiritual practice of yoga, I mean, yoga was first mentioned in the oldest sacred texts of Hinduism. And the Bhagavad Gita actually talks about yoga a lot. It talks about the different purposes of yoga, mainly nirvana, which is like an ultra transcended state of being, and the way to get there. So the term yoga, meaning to yoke or to unite the breath with the body in this process of transcending to liberation or freedom, is very ingrained in the foundational beliefs of yoga. Today in modern culture, it's still called yoga. We still have that uniting of breath and movement. And there's still this desire for the practice of yoga to lead to a higher consciousness, to lead to discovering our divine selves. And ultimately, as a Christian, I don't believe in any of that. I believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. I believe that the true path to freedom and liberation from sin is by claiming the blood of Christ over my life and by submitting myself to God. So, if we look at just the foundation of yoga, where it comes from, like I mentioned, it has its roots in Hinduism. And if we look at the Bible and what the Bible teaches, it doesn't line up. So here in modern day yoga, I mean, it's yoga has been passed down over many generations. And here in modern day yoga, we find that hatha yoga is the most commonly practiced type of yoga. There are different types, Kundalini yoga, yin yoga, many different types, but they all combine the asanas, which are the different poses and postures, with pranayama, which is the control of breath. When I look in the Word of God, I see that God breathed into Adam the breath of life. And so breath is a gift from God, but it's not something that we should try to control and manipulate in order to achieve freedom, which is what yoga teaches. It's also believed that we can activate different energy points in the body with the different asanas or poses. And this is a little bit of a tricky subject to me because, we have things like massage and stretching that actually help to promote circulation in the body, which is a good thing. We need circulation in order to have optimal health. But um, when we're using practices rooted in a specific spiritual practice that is not Christianity, that is not Bible based, it gets a little bit tricky. One main way, or a couple main ways that I see this in modern culture today is that typically when a person goes to a yoga class, they go to an ashram. A yoga ashram is a place of worship. It is a place where, by definition, an ashram is a place of worship. There are frequently idols in ashrams, which seems normal for a place of worship where God, the living God of the living God of the universe, is not worshipped. There's also different things that people say during yoga classes, even if they're in English, that can be a little bit confusing to someone who might be seeking or not have a full understanding of their faith yet. Things like letting go of something that doesn't serve you. As a Christian, I'm here to serve others. I'm here to serve God. I'm not here to serve myself. Does that mean I neglect my self-care? No, but it does mean that I have a different intention when I approach exercise or moving my body.
Sarah, you mentioned something about the ashram, or the place where people go to do yoga, being a place of worship. And you'd also mentioned the different poses. And I'm just curious, some people you mentioned hatha yoga, kundalini yoga, I think there's ashtanga, etc. And I'm curious about the poses. And sometimes people go hot yoga, etc. They're just following and they're told what poses to do and different names, which I won't get into all the names. But what are those poses actually, based on your research as you moved into researching the history of yoga?
Yeah, good question. So those poses are actually tributes to various Hindu gods. Um, there are different names for them in Sanskrit and in English. And I want to be careful when I talk about this because I know that there are many stretches or poses that yoga uses that are actually not tributes to Hindu gods. And then there are several that are. So, like I mentioned earlier, I think the intention that we go into moving our bodies in is really important, but also keeping in mind that many of the traditional postures, including advanced postures in yoga practices, are tributes to different Hindu gods, and there are thousands of them.
Right, that's very interesting. It sounds like you went on a personal journey. You said that often when you start some of these practices, you're just starting at a lower level, and the more advanced you get, the more you learn, and the more you learn about the spiritual aspect as well. I'm wondering, what was the turning point for you to where you decided, I'm not going to instruct yoga anymore?
Yeah, so I realized that it could be very confusing to a person who is unfamiliar with all of the things that I knew, with the advanced things that you learn after being in the yoga space for a long time. I want to share a Bible passage that I think will help to make this very clear. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 to 16. It says, "Be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? What concord hath Christ with Belial? Or what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. And as God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people." So, remembering that earlier I mentioned the word yoga means to yoke or to unite. And this scripture passage is so clear. It says, "Be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers." So, when I show up to a place where people are worshiping idols or people are unconsciously worshiping idols, doesn't matter if it's conscious or not, that is what's happening in that space, and they are being led by someone who is knowing what's going on. um, that is an issue for me because I don't want to be part of that space. Also, recognizing that my body is the temple of God. If my body is the temple of God, why would I go to a place that has idols, where idols are being worshiped, where a different God is being worshiped? And so I think for me, I noticed that some of the students who were coming to my classes were also going to traditional yoga classes, and I didn't want to give off the illusion that a Bible-believing Christian should be going to traditional yoga ashrams to practice.
I have heard of cases where people have had episodes of psychosis, especially when they're focusing a lot on the breath, or it's a practice that's heavily focused on breathing to the point where it might seem like that's all that's happening at that time. Have you heard of any of those cases?
I've not personally experienced anyone experiencing psychosis while practicing, but I can understand how this is possible through the manipulation of the breath. Since in yoga, the goal or the aim is to reach nirvana, which is a type of trance, and this is a mental state of mind, it only makes sense that a shift in normal consciousness could occur through the manipulation of breath, leaving someone with a distorted view of reality.
Right. I'm wondering, what could you recommend, just a former yoga teacher, instructor, to someone who would like to get the benefits of yoga? I mean, studies have shown that yoga decreases anxiety, it is good for reducing stress, etc. So maybe someone who would like those benefits, even the benefits of the athletic benefits, stretching, etc., without encountering yoga's let's say, religious or worshiping underpinnings?
Excellent question. Strength and flexibility can be achieved in a variety of ways. I love stretching, both dynamic and static stretching. So, dynamic stretching are those active stretches where we're moving our body a little bit more actively. Static stretches are the ones that we hold for a little bit longer time. Pilates, calisthenics, simple weightlifting, all of these are really excellent ways to get the same benefits of lowered stress, lowered anxiety. Exercise in general has been scientifically shown to reduce stress and anxiety. So finding an exercise routine that feels good to you is really what matters most.
And Sarah, I just have one final question. If people want to follow you or follow your journey, where can they find you? How can they do that?
Yeah, I am on Instagram and YouTube at Life Loving Jesus, and I hope to connect with anybody who has questions or comments, feedback. I'd love to help people with their health journeys in a variety of different ways. So, yeah, you can find me there online.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. Wow. Sarah's testimony speaks volumes, but so few are aware of those details that she shared. The surprising thing is, even if you are not religiously inclined, yoga itself does present some challenges on a scientific basis as well. Let's explore some of those facts as we weigh the evidence and let the chips fall where they may. Yoga has a universal appeal and is often marketed as an exercise practice that is open to nearly everyone, and that is seen as a positive. However, as we learned in our interview with Sarah Mahinai, the practice involves honoring other gods, and it is therefore incompatible with the Christian faith. Yoga is reported to increase flexibility and balance, as well as reduce fall risk in older adults who do it twice weekly. However, in a study of yoga surveying 1,045 people, 20 to 30% of the participants reported injuries, primarily to the lower back, knees, and to the wrists. In multiple studies, yoga practitioners reported an improvement in their moods to varying degrees right after their yoga sessions. However, there are multiple studies of individuals experiencing psychosis when practicing yoga, especially when incorporating particular breathing exercises. An article found in the Journal of Clinical Psychology plainly stated that yoga had triggered those episodes. Finally, in comparative studies, Pilates rendered similar benefits to yoga, meaning you can get virtually the same benefits from Pilates without the risks of psychosis or religious or even spiritual compromise. And so there you have it. For this skeptic, the decision is a narrow one, but the outcome is clear. Some benefits are just not worth the risk, especially when your soul and mental health are on the line. So, my friends, please continue to stay selectively skeptical.